This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick.
Chapter 4 of The Fires of Heaven, Twilight. And our symbol is the Aiel shield and spears. With his far dark...
Show off your tattoo.
It's not very good. I got it. It's hard to face that to the camera.
I'm enjoying the physical...
It's there.
yeah, there it is. The physical Jenga you were doing to try and get your inside of your arm to show to the camera.
I've considered getting that fixed because it's so old and bad. Not done professionally, and by we were both drunk, so there's that. Anyway, first tattoo though.
It's a worthy one.
With his Fardaris my escort, Rand approached the Ruidian roof of the Maidens. White stairs as wide as the tall building, each step a stride deep, ran up to thick columns 20 paces high, black seeming in the twilight, but bright blue by day, and fluted in spirals. The outside of the building was a patterned mosaic of glazed tiles, white and blue, in spirals that appeared endless to the eye, and a huge window of colored glass directly above the columns showed a black-haired woman 15 feet tall, in complicated blue robes, right hand upraised, either to bless or command a halt. Her face was serene and stern at the same time. Whoever she had been, she was surely no Aiel, not with that pale skin and those dark eyes, an Aes Sedai, perhaps. He tapped his pipe out on his boot heel and stuffed it into his coat pocket before starting up the steps. Except for Gai'Shane, men were not allowed beneath a roof of the Maidens, not any man, not in any hold in the waste. A chief or a maiden's bloodkin could die trying, though, in fact, no Aielman would ever think of it. It was the same for any society. Only members and the Gai'Shane were allowed inside. The two maidens standing guard at the tall bronze doors flashed maiden hand-talk at one another, cutting their eyes in his direction as he came through the columns. They shared a small grin. He wished he knew what they said. Even in as dry a land as the waste, bronze would tarnish with enough time. But Gai'Shane had polished these doors until they looked new-made. They stood wide open, and the pair of guards made no move to hinder him as he walked through, Adelin and the others on his heels. The wide, white-tiled corridors and great rooms inside were full of maidens, sitting about on bright cushions, talking, tending to weapons, playing cat's cradle, or stones, or thousand flowers, an Aiel game that involved laying out patterns of flat bits of stone carved in what seemed 100 different symbols. Of course, a profusion of Gai'Shane moved smoothly about their chores, cleaning, serving, mending, seeing to oil lamps that ranged from simple glazed pottery to gilded loot from somewhere, to the tall stand lamps that had been found in the city. In most rooms, colorful carpets and bright tapestries covered the floors and walls, in nearly as many patterns and styles as there were carpets and tapestries. The walls and ceilings themselves were detailed mosaics of forests and rivers and skies that had never been seen in the waste. Young or old, the maidens smiled when they saw him, and some nodded familiarly.
It's a tough word.
Jesus. I'm leaving it. Or even patted his shoulder. Others called out, asking how he was. Had he eaten? Would he like Gai'Shane to bring him wine or water? He responded briefly, though with answering smiles. He was well, and neither hungry nor thirsty. He kept walking, not even slowing when he spoke. Slowing would lead inevitably to stopping, and he was not up to that tonight. Fardaris Mai had adopted him, after a fashion. Some treated him as a son, others as a brother. Age seemed not to come into it. Women with white in their hair might talk to him as a brother over tea, while maidens no more than a year older than he tried to make sure he wore the proper clothes for the heat. There was no avoiding the mothering. They simply did it, and he could not see how to make them stop, short of using the power against the whole lot of them.
That's one of the rare introductions that I have absolutely nothing to say about.
Yeah, the only thing that stuck out to me was the game that's called Thousand Flowers. It looks like dominoes.
Oh, yeah, I didn't notice that.
And we see Rand thinking after that he had considered or he had thought of trying to find another society to provide his honor guard, but realized that it would probably shame the Maidens, even for asking.
Well, I think it would shame him to be like, I don't want Maidens to guard me because they treat me like I'm a kid. You know, like, that's hard to admit. It's hard to, like, you can't just say that out loud. Right? I don't want to be treated like a little kid, like, so I need someone else to guard me. Like, he has no idea what excuse to come up with to be like, can I get the red shields?
Right, so he just doesn't.
Yeah. And besides, they carry his honor, which is a side effect of his unwilling courtship of Aviendha.
Mm-hmm.
But also a side effect of him being the last, sort of the found son of a maiden, the only one that's ever come back to them. So there's a bit of a confluence.
Something Rand may not fully understand, that the Maidens are struggling. They don't know how to deal with him. There's no rules to govern this. So we find out later, I thought this was kind of really cute, that Rand moved into Ruidian, found an empty building, picked room that was like exactly in the center of the building, as far as up and down and side to side. So he has a windowless chamber in the center, the exact center of the building. And then he basically wakes up one day and finds that the Maidens have just chosen that this is their roof in Ruidian. And they're just moving in. And
he's like, okay.
They keep moving up in floors as the building fills, and he keeps moving his room, and they keep just moving on up with him.
Yep.
And there's no way to like talk to them about this, but they've just decided that this is theirs, and he doesn't have to leave, but there's no rules that govern. He's a free man who lives inside a Maiden's roof, which is just not, right. It's not a thing. That doesn't
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was there first, so okay.
I think they think it's a game, as they do a lot of things, especially the younger.
Sure, they're fucking with him.
Yeah.
But they're also protecting him. They're there because, well, we carry his honor, so we're going to live around him and make sure he's taken care of and protected.
Right. And on the trying to choose another society to, or his thoughts on trying to choose another society to be his honor guard, I just noticed this last sentence that I actually didn't mark, but the Maidens, he had once said, carry my honor. Everyone remembered that, and the Maidens were as proud of it as if he had given them all thrones, but it had turned out that they carried it in a manner that they chose.
Yeah.
The other Maidens and Adeline leave him, and
I thought this was an important quote where he's talking about Moraine. She knew exactly how to manipulate his emotions, how to make him so angry that he said more than he wanted to. I never used to get so angry. Why is it so hard to hold on to my temper? I do think that his temper is part of his madness.
I think so too. We see him irrationally angry all the time later.
Yeah.
And we've talked a lot in earlier episodes about how much of his strange behavior at various times throughout the series is stress and sleeplessness and things like that, and how much is the madness itself. And it's hard to say.
One thing I noticed on one of my listens is that he really stops sleeping once he gets bonded by Alana, and he has the ability of a warder to sort of ignore sleep most nights.
I never really noticed that.
That he gains some physical stamina and the ability to skip sleep once she bonds him.
You know, that makes me wonder, do we know at all what effect it would have on a man to be bonded multiple times? Do those abilities stack, for lack of a better, for a D&D term?
Well, I don't know. Well, and that bonding he gets with the three women is not exactly a warder bond. It's something like a warder bond, but it's sort of
true.
A warder. Yeah, it's combined with the Aiel first sister bond, in a weird way.
That's a good point. That three of those bonds are different, but one of them is a warder bond. So he at least has the regular benefits that one warder would have. It's interesting. Especially if the abilities stack, and it would explain why, Rand is like undefeatable in combat and all that.
Why he's got like more stamina than most, because he's pulling from all the women.
Doesn't need to sleep, barely needs to eat, and he's a ferocious fighter even with...
But I feel like that final bond isn't until like the very end of the series.
That's more or less true.
He spends most of the series just bonded to Alana.
And I mean, we could certainly write off his combat abilities as training with the finest warriors in the world every day.
Well, and having memories of a 400-year-old man.
Right.
And
being an incredibly powerful channeler himself.
I also wonder if he's ever able to pull strength from Moradin.
That's a sort of bond as well.
That is a bond, where the pattern sort of conflagrates their two threads as a single thread, and that allows him to sort of do things that only Moradin should be able to do. And
we do see undeniably that their health is tied together.
Sure. And you know, so their moods are as well. Ugh. Yeah.
When Rand gets his hand blown off.
Yeah, there's some...
Is it? It's Moradin.
Moradin feels it.
Moradin feels it.
That's why he's so angry at Summerog for doing it. He's like, he wasn't to be hurt. And then he's like, oh, my hand. You know, and it's like, okay, so you felt the hand being burned off, basically. And that's part of why Rand is so able to dismiss the damage to his body, is because it doesn't necessarily feel like his body. He's feeling Moradin's body as much as anything else.
Yeah, weird.
And Moradin's body still has a hand. That bond is fascinating. And, you know, all from the crossing of the true power, one power, Balefire streams being crossed. Don't cross. Fuck. Ghostbusters knew what they were talking about, man.
It was already seeping into the room, but he did not bother to light the dried cow dung on the hearth. He was readier to face the cold than the smell. Asmodean had tried to show him a simple way to keep the room warm. Simple, but something the man did not have enough strength to do himself. The one time Rand had tried it, he had awakened in the middle of the night, gasping for breath while the edges of the rug smoldered from the heat of the floor. He had not made another attempt. He had chosen this building for his quarters because it was whole and near to the plaza. Its great high ceilings gave a semblance of coolness even to the hottest part of the day, and its thick walls kept out of the worst of the cold at night. It had not been the roof of the Maidens then, of course. One morning, he simply awakened to find it so. Maidens in every room on the first 2 floors, and their guards on the doors. It had taken him a while to realize that they intended the building for their society's roof in Ruidian, yet expected him to continue to stay in it. In fact, they were ready to move the roof wherever he went. That was why he had to meet the clan chiefs elsewhere. The best he had been able to manage was to make the Maidens agree to stay below the floor where he slept. That had amused them all to no end. Even the Kara Karn is not a king, he reminded himself wryly. Twice already he had moved upward as the numbers of Maidens increased. Idly, he tried to calculate how many more could come in before he was sleeping on the roof.
Moving on up. Yeah. Well, it's, you know, his weirdness about privacy, too, that he wants his own space where he can, like...
No, they love it. They find it endlessly amusing that... They're like, yeah, sure, we won't stay on that floor, but we might walk around naked, say. And then he's like, damn it. He goes up another floor.
I thought it was interesting him thinking about how he can trust Asmodean more than Moraine, because Asmodean depends on him and Moraine doesn't. Because to Moraine, I'm still just a shepherd she can use for the tower's ends, but to Asmodean, I'm the only branch she can hold on to in a flood. And I think he's totally misreading Moraine there.
I think so, too. But Rand has this deep mistrust for all Aes Sedai. And they're, this nebulous force outside of his control that he really has no understanding of at all. So I guess what I'm saying is that his ignorance is fueling his bad decisions.
Right. He thinks that Moraine is just still trying to use him for some random tower ends, when really she just wants him to, save the world. I mean, I guess that's manipulating, but, she's got your best interests at heart, man.
And he doesn't realize even that he could use that as leverage over Moraine, because Moraine is hiding that fact. If the tower found out what she was doing, well, what happened to Swan Sanche might happen to her.
Which we don't even know. He doesn't even know about that yet.
Yeah, he doesn't understand that, but Moraine is in a similar position to Asmodean.
Yeah.
She can't admit what she's done.
No, and she's very much depends on him. If he fails, she'll go down too. No, he's totally misreading her motivation.
I always thought it was a shame. I wish they had trusted each other. And
well, and I think there's a good portion of this book is coming to trust each other. And then, of course, obviously, when they look back, and it takes time. You know, it's interesting that she goes in and she's being tortured for such a long time, but that time is almost necessary for him to understand that she was on his side, that she was there to help him.
She made this incredible sacrifice. He's in his room tooling around, and Aviendha enters.
She's been gone for 10 days that he hasn't seen her, which is a hugely long time because she was the one who was going to watch him. So he's like, what's going on? Where have you been? And also, you know, he's missed her because he loves her. Just a little bit.
And we find out in the next chapter that Aviendha has been being punished for at least quite a bit of that time. That after she gave Rand a hint that the Wise Ones were watching his dreams and the Wise Ones found out, they made her dig holes until they were up to her shoulder. And so she had to stand in them, presumably, and then climb back out and fill them for days. I think it was 3 days
Over
she had to
and
do
over
that
and
for.
over again.
Just, yeah, dig a ditch, fill it.
It's useless labor.
And we find out later that useless labor is the worst punishment you can be given.
Absolutely. So she really fucked up.
In Aiel society, yeah.
And she, at this point, she's wearing the necklace that Egwene gave her. It's the snowflake necklace. I like the way he describes it. A string of intricately worked discs. Each disc is a snowflake.
Oh, yeah.
So they're like this snowflake necklace, and he describes them as intricately worked discs because they're symmetrical.
Yeah. Oh, you know, now that I think of it, that makes sense. Because what we think of as a snowflake pattern is not really accurate as far as nature goes. Snowflakes don't actually look like that. They're, not a one-dimensional whatever. It's a motif that we understand to represent snow.
I mean, have you ever seen microscopic images of snowflakes?
Yeah, and it's not. It's not dissimilar, but it's not.
They're geometric patterns generally, based around a 6-pointed
star,
hexagon. They actually do kind of look just like that. Yeah, the crystalline structure of ice is fascinating. If you look at like macro photos of snowflakes.
Whoa, is that real?
Yeah,
I'm looking at pictures. I didn't think they could be so perfect.
Oh, they totally are. They're awesome. Like snowflakes are. I mean, I know they call every snowflake is unique, but every snowflake is a geometric pattern based on the speck of dust at its center that the ice froze around. And it's amazing that because of the molecular structure of water, snowflakes have both this 6-pointed structure that's almost inevitable to them, but also always go off on these wacky patterns.
I did not know that they had to have a 6-pointed structure. I always thought it was just probably a random collection of ice crystals. That
I'm fairly certain about that.
No, it's crazy. I'm looking at pictures. I had no idea. I mean, I guess, not truly perfect. I'm looking at microscopic images, but they are usually 6-pointed or like a fractal of 6-pointed things. That's nuts. All right, well. Rand doesn't know what that looks like still.
I didn't know you didn't know that. Yeah. Well, he doesn't have a microscope yet. They're just developing telescopes. So in his school, they figure out how to make a telescope, but microscopes are still a long way off. Let's see. Snowflakes have, fascinated science for centuries. Jonas Kepler, the 17th century astronomer who the Kepler telescope was named after, discovered that all snowflakes are variations on a 6-sided crystal and each is unique.
Interesting tangent. Rand and Aviendha haven't seen each other in 10 days. Rand seems to think that the necklace was a gift from a suitor, and he feels jealous about it. I noticed.
I mean, who's to say Egwene isn't a suitor?
Fair.
Do we? I mean, I'm just saying.
People can make their own choices. We also see this. I actually didn't mark this to read, but I thought it was cute. He had missed her. He had even picked flowers from some of the spiny plants around Ruidian, bloodying his fingers until he realized he could use the power, and sent them to her, 6 times. The maidens had carried the blossoms themselves, instead of sending Gaishane. She had never acknowledged them, of course. And we see that later in the next chapter.
Yeah.
When Aviendha sits gingerly in the sweat tent, and then she leaves at one point. Egwene's like, why was she beaten? And the wise ones are just like, oh, because she had toe. And she said she had lied twice, but not to any wise ones, so no big deal. We gave her a couple extra straps because we thought it was annoying that she even had bothered to ask.
Right. She's like being too prideful. She's being the maiden that she is, which is...
And from Egwene's perspective, she walks up to Aviendha, and she's holding these flowers and looking at them dreamily or something, and she's like, oh, Egwene, yeah, these flowers are for you. I picked them.
Uh-huh.
And that's the one lie, and the next lie is in the next scene, I think, when she tells Rand that she hates him. Yeah, the next thing I have is a read. Why did you want to see me? To his surprise, she folded her arms beneath her breasts and paced the short length of the room twice before stopping to glare at him.
In the paragraph before that, Rand felt his cheeks coloring. She knew. What does she know? I wasn't able to, I wanted to ask you about that. What does she know? And what is he referring to when he says she knew? I don't have... He didn't light his fire last night? I don't understand why he's blushing about that. Like, I'm feel like I'm missing something in that exchange right there.
That I just assumed that it was probably maybe a twofold thing, that he feels embarrassed that the maidens are babying him, and they're always trying to get him to light his fire, which he won't do because he thinks it smells bad. But it's a thing that everyone else around him ignores.
So she knows about how the maidens treat him. And
he also accidentally set his room on fire, trying to not light the cow dung, which I thought was like an admission of weakness kind of in his eyes, because the next thing says...
Or he's trying to use that weave to keep the room warm that Asmodean taught him, but he almost kills himself with it.
And then he thinks the bloody maidens may not tell her everything anymore, but they don't bother to keep anything from her either.
Okay.
Which, yeah, it does seem kind of a weak reason to be embarrassed about anything.
Right. I guess just that she knows how the maidens treat him. But, she's a maiden. Of course she knows. She would treat him the exact same way, right? The maidens treat him like one of three things. A son, a brother, or a lover. Mm-hmm. There's only one maiden that treats him like a lover, though, and that's Aviendha.
Well, right. All of the maidens know. Yes. So there's no making mistakes in this regard.
No.
They're all... And again, before Rand pointed out that he wanted to send flowers to Aviendha, and the maidens take a personal interest and they bring the flowers themselves. They could have sent a servant.
Right. Or a guy,
which is probably what Rand was expecting. Yeah. Would you send a runner to bring these to her? And these well-ranked maidens go themselves to bring them. Be like, hey, Rand was thinking about you.
I mean, this is so Shakespearean in terms of being, going to one and being like, hey, guess what? She likes you. And being like, really? And then going to her and being like, yeah, he likes you. And her going like, really? And then neither one of them having those feelings until they're told that the other one likes them. It's totally accidental,
Why did he want to see me? To his surprise, she folded her arms beneath her breasts and paced the short length of the room twice before stopping to glare at him. This was not a regard gift, she said accusingly, shaking the bracelet at him. You admitted as much. True, though he thought she might have put a knife in his ribs had he not conceded it. It was simply a fool gift from a man who did not know or care what the Spear Sisters might think. Well, this has no meaning either. She pulled something from her pouch and tossed it onto the pallet beside him. It cancels debt between us. Rand picked up what she had thrown and turned it over in his hands. A belt buckle, in the shape of a dragon, ornately made in good steel and inlaid with gold. Thank you. It's beautiful. Aviendha, there is no debt to cancel. If you will not take it against my debt, she said firmly, then throw it away. I'll find something else to repay you. It's only a trinket. Hardly a trinket? You must have had this made. Do not think that means anything, Rand al'Thor. When I gave up the spear, my spears, my knife, unconsciously her hand brushed her belt, where that long-bladed knife used to hang. Even the points of my arrows were taken from me and handed to a smith to make simple things to give away. Most I gave to friends, but the wise ones had me name 3 men and 3 women I most hate, and I was told to give each of them a gift made from my weapons, with my own hands. Bear says it teaches humility. Straight-backed and glaring, biting off each word, she looked and sounded anything but humble. So, you will not think that means anything. It means nothing, he said, nodding sadly. Not that he wanted it to mean anything, really, but it would have been pleasing to think she might be beginning to see him as a friend. It was plain foolish to feel jealousy over her. I wonder who gave it to her. He's wondering about the necklace.
Yeah.
Aviendha, was I one of those you hate so much? Yes, Rand al'Thor. She suddenly sounded hoarse. For a moment, she turned her face away, eyes shut and quivering. I hate you with all of my heart. I do, and I always will.
She's looking away because it's a lie.
And she's crying when she says it, so.
No.
He did not bother to ask why. Once, he had asked her why she disliked him, and practically had his nose snapped off. She had not told him, though. But this was more than a dislike she sometimes seemed to forget. If you really hate me, he said reluctantly, I will ask the wise ones to send someone else to teach me. No, she says. And Rand's just like, oh my god. She won't listen to any reason.
Well, and this is oftentimes men try and solve problems, and when women are just saying, I have this issue, and I want you to listen. I think that's what he's like, well, wait, if you hate me, let's solve the problem. She's like, no, you don't understand. There's no solution. I'm just bitching, because this sucks. But there's nothing you can do to solve the problem. Even if the wise ones allowed me to stop, I have obligation and duty to my near sister Elaine to watch you for her. You belong to her, Rand al'Thor, to her and no other woman. Remember that. Especially not me. She's reminding herself that Rand belongs to Elaine, that she can't have Rand.
Later, he's like, we made out a couple of times. What are you talking about? I belong to her. This is so weird, man.
Yeah, he's like, I kissed her a few times. I enjoyed it. She did too.
He also says, I don't even have time to think about women.
Yeah.
Trying to unite all the clans under me and bring them to the wetlands and save the goddamn world.
And then he goes into I think this is our best description of what's actually in the letters that Elaine sends to him from his perspective.
When he says even the letters were confusing?
Yeah. In the space of a few hours, she had written him 2 letters. One called him the dearest light of her heart before going on to make his ears burn. While the other named him a cold-hearted wretch she never wanted to see again, and then proceeded to rip him up one side and down the other better than Aviendha ever had. And I'm like, okay, so, which is Rand al'Thor, you're, a worthless, blah, 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 and how dare you leave and not come back? And it's just so funny that, from his perspective, those letters make no sense whatsoever. But from her perspective, it's like, oh yeah, I love you. Can't you tell from the letters? And he's like, what? No, what? No. So I sympathize a little bit. I also wish I had read the text of those letters, but this to me is one of, at least from his perspective, the most accurate description we get of the content of the letters. She has a different perspective.
Yeah. And then, of course, Isandra walks in, who is not allowed to... She's only allowed to wear the jewelry that she stole.
Which means she's pretty naked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she walks in, she's trying to bring Rand wine, and Aviendha's staring there. Aviendha's standing there.
Rand is staring there. Or trying not to, anyway.
Yeah, I think so. Did someone send you with that? She asked coldly. Isandra opened her mouth, the intended lie plain on her face, then gulped and whispered, "No." "You have been warned about this Sorda." Sorda was a kind of rat, especially sly, according to the Aiel, and good for absolutely nothing. Its flesh was so rank that even cats seldom ate the ones they killed.
That's rank.
Yeah, have you smelled cat food?
Yes, unfortunately.
And I don't know how much we want to go over the Isandra thing, but she's supposed to seduce him, I think, to kill him or get close to him or something. So she keeps trying because she's compelled by the shadow, and the maidens keep catching her and punishing her further each time she disobeys.
And she's also been, she did steal some of that stuff, but also Lanfear stole a bunch of that stuff and hid it in her collection and then told on her.
Lanfear set her up.
Yeah, so Lanfear set her up. So partially why she's being punished is because of the Lanfear setup, but she does kind of deserve it.
Right. And the only reason her punishments aren't worse is because Rand tried to intercede and say, this wasn't her fault. She was set up, but the maidens aren't really having it. They're like, all right, we'll back off a little, but she's still getting punished for stealing stuff from maidens.
And she's still technically a dark friend, so Rand's like, yeah, I guess, but he did keep her from being killed. I was going back through and re-listening, as I often do, and this is something we've already covered, but when Matt kills a couple of guys on his lucky night, and he's like, oh my gosh, I've never even hurt another human, and now I've killed two.
Yeah.
I had to think back in the Great Hunt, he stabbed the guy with a dagger who rotted and turned into a putrid mass of dead flesh. He killed that guy. And I'm like, did you just happen...
Is there any chance he doesn't remember that?
Possibly? I don't know. It was just one of those things where I was like, no, you killed the guy. Admittedly, the Shadar Logoth dagger did most of the work. You just slashed his hand. But you killed the guy.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And he's definitely hurt people. I don't really know what he's talking about.
Yeah, no. I was like,
he's definitely beating people up and stuff.
Yeah. And this comes back to this line where Rand says, once he had killed a woman who meant to kill him, but the memory still burned. Which woman is that? Mm-hmm. Who is he referring to?
I thought it was the merchant.
Is it the merchant
in Great Hunt?
Is that it?
I think that's great. Wait a minute. Is that Great Hunt? Or is that Dragon Reborn? I think that might be in Dragon Reborn.
That's Dragon Reborn when he's traveling.
Okay. Yeah, because he straight up beheads her.
Right.
I'm trying to think of any other woman that he killed up until that point. I don't think there are any.
Christine is saying the woman in the barn?
I don't think they killed... I think they locked her in a closet or something. But they hid her and...
That was Millie Skane, who's in...
With the burning knife.
With the burning knife, yeah. She shows up later.
Went over the Isandra thing well enough. The maidens took her for stealing the jewelry. That was now all they let her wear.
And he is somewhat protecting her just so, again, we talked about this early on, but he doesn't want them to know she's dark friend so that they don't figure out that Asmodean is forsaken.
And, he also really doesn't understand Aiel culture. Because at some point he's like, damn, Aviendha, listen, I'll take the wine. It's not a big deal. Yeah. He doesn't seem to understand.
But there's no fucking way he's going to drink that wine. After she leaves, he puts aside, he's like, I'm not drinking anything that dark friend gives to me. Fuck no. Are you kidding me? He doesn't want Aviendha to get upset, but there's no way he's drinking that wine. He is not thirsty enough to drink that shit.
He knows not to trust her.
Yeah. And yeah, she'd been switched 7 times for trying to sneak into her bed. She would not persist like that without some encouragement. And Aviendha thinks it's Rand who's flirting, but it's not. It's the
Yeah.
encouragement of Kadir to say, like, you better fucking sleep with him or else. It's true she's getting encouragement, just not from Rand. And so Aviendha is totally pissed at Rand for flirting with Essendra, even though he's not at all. She thinks he is.
Yeah, I believe him when he has the thought early, or says out loud, I think, actually, that he doesn't have time to, like, date and shop around for a girlfriend. It's like, I'm a little busy here trying to save the damn world.
Well, that's why the wise ones were like, yeah, here's a woman for you. Let me just shove her into your tent. He's like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you put two people together with some shared experiences and difficult times, and it's just not too surprising, especially two young people, similar circumstances, spending all this time together. It's not weird. It's like a workplace romance, you know? You spend 40 hours a week together. It's not that weird. You got to know each other.
It reminds me of the joke. How did you know President Clinton worked harder than President Kennedy?
How?
President Kennedy was having sex with a movie star. President Clinton was having sex with an intern. He was so fucking busy. He just stuck his head out the door. Was like, you come here.
Really can't get out of the office right now.
Kennedy was out there like dating movie stars, going on like glamorous parties. Clinton's like, I'm busy. Come on, you. It's a terrible joke, but it kind of reminds me of Rand, dating a queen on one hand, or Aviendha, the girl who's like in his tent. Like, against his will. He's like, oh, fine. I'm busy. You're cute. Let's get this over with.
A queen, a warrior, and a horse hand.
Yeah, and yet the horse hand seems to be the best of the three.
She's down to earth, man. She's cool. I like men.
She's a reader.
Of the three, I think I would be most interested in men. Yeah, also reader.
Yep.
That's like one of my initial checks when I'm dating someone. Oh, you read books? Okay.
Check.
Well, then this can continue.
Then I don't have to dump you. Excellent.
I'm skipping ahead a bit here, but Aviendha says, you can leave the wine there, and now you will run to the first maiden you can find, Aviendha went on, and tell her what you have done. Run, sorta. Moaning and wringing her hands, Isandra ran in a great rattle of jewelry.
And Rand thinks she's trying to reach him because he's interceded on her behalf, but he doesn't realize it's all a plot to get him into the grasp of the spider. Yeah, either way, his Puritan values are going to prevent him from falling into that trap. Congratulations, I guess. No. I did want to bring up the fact that I was thinking about the scar in Rand's side, and the fact that Rand is one with the Dragon Reborn is one with the land. Land is one with the Dragon Reborn. And how the half-healed scar in Rand's side is essentially the equivalency of the bore that's drilled, that's basically like Shale Ghoul in the land. It's the place where the land is close to the Dark One. It's the bore drilled into his side.
Yeah, I never really thought of that, but I think you're absolutely right.
And as the bore opens up, it gets worse and worse and worse. More and more tainted. More and more painful.
Fane's...
Yeah, Fane slash is Shatter
Logoth on top of it.
Exactly. You have these alternating pulses that cancel each other out. The opposite attract, and he uses that both in terms of using the Sidene to control Sidar, or Sidar to control Sidene, and using the taint on Shadow Logoth to attract the taint of the Dark One. So, the cleansing. Honestly, I think the three most important scenes in the Wheel of Time is the crossing of the streams, the cleansing of the source, and the golden threads on the mountaintop. Like, even more important than battling the Dark One. Even more important than the last battle.
Those are three really important scenes.
Yeah. And we haven't touched on any of them yet, so I can't wait to get there.
I have a handful of favorites in each book, and as we were talking before, I know I bring this up fairly frequently, but that scene where Matt cuts the guy with the dagger when Turok is confronting Rand and his group, and some guy rushes across and tries to grab Matt, and Matt cuts him, and the guy, like, reels back and starts turning black and, like, smoking and screaming in pure agony. And everybody's just silent in the room as the man slowly dies and withers into nothingness. That scene. Where the two forces, or the two groups that are about to fight each other, back away as they watch this horror in front of them all.
Yeah, and that's the scene I was referencing earlier when I was like, Matt totally fucking killed the dude.
That will lend itself so well to film.
That long before he threw a guy off a bridge in Tarvalin, like, he stabbed a dude with a knife, and then, I mean, I guess the knife did the work, but it was brutal. That was a brutal death.
That's some horror film stuff.
Oh God.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something about, I really kind of hope the new TV show takes a bit of a horror fantasy genre on.
It's so dark, it would be really easy to, you don't even really have to amplify it as much as just focus on the darkness.
Yeah.
7 times she tried to reach me? She must have learned that he interceded for her. No doubt. To her way of thinking. If he was willing to do that for a smoky look and a smile, what might he do for more? He shivered at the thought, as much as the increasing cold. He would rather have a scorpion in his bed. If the Maidens failed to convince her, he might tell her what he knew about her. That should put an end to any schemes. Snuffing the lamps, he crawled onto his pallet in the dark, still booted and fully dressed, and fumbled around until he had pulled all of the blankets over him. Without the fire, he suspected he really would be grateful to Aviendha before the morning. Setting the wards of spirit that shielded his dreams from intrusion was almost automatic to him by now, but even as he did it, he chuckled to himself. He could have gotten into bed and then put out the lamps, with the power. It was the simple things that he never thought of doing with the power. For a time, he lay waiting for his body's heat to warm the inside of the blankets. How the same place could be so hot by day and so cold by night was beyond him. Sticking one hand under his coat, he fingered the half-healed scar in his side. That wound, the one that Moraine could never completely heal, was what would kill him eventually. He was sure of it. His blood on the rocks of Shale Ghul. That was what the prophecy said. Not tonight. I won't think of that tonight. I have a little time yet. But if the seals can be shaved with a knife now, do they still hold as strongly? No, not tonight. The inside of the blankets was becoming a little warmer, and he shifted around, trying and failing to find a comfortable way to lie. I should have washed, he thought drowsily. Egwene was probably in a warm sweat tent right that minute. Half the time he used one, a fistful of maidens tried to come in with him, and nearly rolled on the ground laughing when he insisted on them staying outside. It was bad enough having to undress and dress in the steam. Sleep finally came, and with it, safely protected dreams, safe from the wise ones or anyone else. Not protected from his own thoughts, though. 3 women invaded them continually. Not Isandra, except in a brief nightmare that nearly woke him. By turns he dreamed of Elaine, and Min, and Aviendha. By turns and together. Only Elaine had ever looked at him as a man, but all 3 saw him as who he was, not what he was. Aside from the nightmare, they were all pleasant dreams.
I had to do some sorting through some files this morning because I had not sorted through my last 2 Just Roll With It recordings. So they're all just like dumped in a folder. And I do those recordings. I record a master file of everybody. I record myself and I record the sound effects. And I recorded, 4 sessions each time. So it was something like 24 different files that I had to figure out like what each one of them was and sort through them because I forgot to label them last time. the last 2 times, and so I was like, oh my god, I just had just a pile of files that I had to like load each one up and figure out like which one is it, label it, put it in the right folder, download it, bleh. And then I include everyone's files from their local recordings. I have to download as well. That all gets sorted through. It takes me. It's funny. It takes a while. It's surprising how long it takes just to sort and download and move files around to get rid. There's 2 Mistborn ready to publish.
It's been a bit, yeah.
So, sort of back on the horse. We took a bit of an extended break there, but we are back to producing content on a regular schedule. Oh yeah, I guess we haven't released a Watt spoilers in a long time. It's been a minute. Yeah. Especially if you consider the last 2 were something we'd already recorded and other people talking.
Stuff from Jordan Con, probably.
And so it's really like been 3 episodes since we released anything, and it's been like, oh, so good. I'm amazed how many people have, actually. I'm pretty happy about that. N.K. Jemisin is a fantastic author. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. I had a similar experience.
I've only read it.
She's just blew me away, and it's unfortunately it's made read what I would think is the best narration job I've ever heard in a audiobook.
And I'm assuming is Robin
have you not
girl's
listened to
name
it?
in this case?
Just read it. Oh my god! Yeah, no, so good.
I mean, it would be kind of weird to have a man read it.
That, like,
to be honest,
as much as I love Michael Kramer and Kate Redding, and as amazing as a job as they did on the Wheel of Time,
surprising amount. I was listening to
and her.
Oh gosh, I can't even remember now. A couple of good
wonderful to listen to.
Political podcasts.
I find
listened to a ton of political podcasts
voice
recently, and there were some
annoying
speakers and hosts that were just like they had really annoying inflections. I remember this one guy who would like start every sentence like, yeah, in this weird like high pitched way, and then like his voice would drop back to a normal, and I was like, I found it so irritating I couldn't continue listening.
Mm-hmm. That's what a good editor does, is take that stuff out, right? Like I do a lot of, when I edit the stuff, take out generally the first thing I say when I start a sentence is, okay, so it doesn't need to be in there. It just doesn't have to be in there. And it's usually louder. It's usually like a different intonation and everything. So, but an editor who wants to convey information would go in and remove that because it's not part of what they're saying. It's just.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?